Hello, and welcome to the August 23rd, 2018 edition of Shrewsbury Matters, a monthly show that presents a different perspective on the town's politics and problems. My name is John Lukach. The main topics for today's show are shown on slide 1, and they are, first, the update on the Route 20 rezoning to mixed use. Second, the town, quote, apology letter on water problems. Third is the update on water billing problems. There's been no response. And fourth is the Beale School replacement project, which is going to be coming before town meeting and the voters in the fall. So it's coming up fairly quickly. And two of the issues that I want to bring up tonight is that first it exceeds the MSBA guidelines for total square footage by a substantial amount, and it also uses bloated estimates for cost per square foot. So let's go back and start with the update on Route 20 rezoning to mixed use. There was a T&G article dated July 25th that presented the rezoning of the Route 20 overlay district as very favorable to the town. Of course, it is not. It will have long-term unfavorable financial impacts to the town. This misleading article is not the fault of the T&G. The writer was merely reporting what town officials said. So why will the Route 20 rezoning be unfavorable to the town? Because this area, which formerly did not allow any residential development, now allows up to 250 residential units per project. Thus, it will increase the maximum number of residential units in town, possibly by over 1,000 residential units in the upcoming years. That same T&G article showed a map that identified the commercial and residential portions of the first project of this type, the old Edgemere drive-in property. The map shows that about two-thirds, that's two-thirds of the land in that plot will be residential. The 250 units that they're planning there will take up about two-thirds of the total space of that that's in that land. Town officials frequently complain about how little land in Shrewsbury is zoned commercial, yet here they are effectively, maybe not officially according to the zoning charts, but effectively they are reducing the amount of land that will be used for commercial purposes. Another bad decision because of its long-term negative financial consequences. And we owe this to the selectmen. The second topic is what I found last month, at the end of last month. The town evidently issued what I consider to be somewhat of an apology letter regarding the water problems in town. It is a letter in a letter to Shrewsbury Water Department customers posted on the town website dated July 26, but as far as I know, not actually mailed to anybody so that people became aware of it. Town officials provided an update on the town's water quality. In the last paragraph, titled Closing Matters, they essentially apologize for the town's water quality problems. But of course, they would not come right out and say so. Let me read that last paragraph and note the way it's worded. Closing Matters. The town of Shrewsbury is working diligently to eliminate the ongoing water quality challenges of recent years. We are confident the approach that is underway is the best long-term solution. Unfortunately, we have not communicated effectively. Please be assured that this is not because we are not concerned about our customers or the issues at hand. As described above, activities and disturbances are now having a greater impact on the system. On several occasions, we have underestimated this impact and were ineffective in communicating. We always encourage customers to reach out to town officials directly to be sure we are aware of the problems. The town does not monitor social media pages. While sharing information with neighbors and friends is helpful to them, it does not guarantee the town is aware of the issue. So in other words, they have a problem, but part of the problem is town residents haven't communicated directly to them about the problems. Although, enough people haven't complained, that more complaints might have made them react a little faster. That is That's nonsense. So, let me just go review that again. The town is working diligently. Oh yeah, since when? What took them so long to realize that they had major problems and react much faster than they did? What took them so long? Second, they say to eliminate the ongoing water quality challenges of recent years. Note the use of the word challenges instead of the word problems. Evidently, town officials are still in denial that they have major problems with the water system in general, not just with water quality. And then the third one is, and finally they say, unfortunately, we have not communicated effectively. So finally, we have something close to an apology. But even here, they refuse to acknowledge their poor management of the water system. No, they think it's only a communication issue. No big deal, right? Wrong. It has been and will continue to be a major problem until the selectmen finally start managing the water system problems. Oh, did I say the selectmen? Yes, they are the water commissioners. The letter should have come from them, and the letter should have clearly apologized for the problems, not merely the communication issue. And even this letter was poor communications. It was posted on the website, addressed to all water customers on July 26. But how many customers ever saw it there? Very few. So the very letter that identifies a communication problem fails to get communicated effectively. How ironic is that? So third, I want to go and give you a quick update on the water billing problem that I had brought up in last month's show, and that I had communicated with the town manager's office before last month. I reported that I had identified what appeared to be significant errors in the town's water billing system. I communicated that some of the issues I found prior to last month's show in July, and haven't received a response yet. The problems may include failing to bill large customers, large unexplained variances in quarterly consumption, and a lack of variance reports. I had communicated these problems to the town manager's office and asked for a follow-up. I still have received no response. I'm not surprised. This lack of response has occurred in the past when I have identified problems in the town's systems and reports in other areas. It takes a long time if they respond at all, and by that time then they say, oh yeah, we fixed the problem, it's no big deal. Well, it's no big deal finally because they fixed the problem. It was a big deal before they fixed the problem. And that's the way they play these word games. So now let's go to the major topic for today, and that is the Beale School Replacement Project. So let's go to slide 2. Okay, now this information are taken directly from the documents of the Beale Building Committee on its website. So anybody, I pulled this information off, otherwise it was very busy. I've summarized all the other categories under all other, but the academic and the SPED are exactly as shown on their documents, and the total net is the same and the total gross is the same. So back on, again, the first, these numbers, just to summarize, they exceed the MSBA guidelines for total square footage by a substantial amount. And I'll go through this. So the first column shows the square footages. I mean, the first column is basically showing which area, the various areas of the school. The first column of numbers shows the square footages of the current Beale School. And obviously that number is very low. The second column of numbers shows the project proposal. The third column shows the MSBA guidelines for a school with the same enrollment. Now that's important because the MSBA says if you exceed our guidelines, they can start, they will say they will not reimburse for that. They can say, I don't know if they will, but they could say they will not reimburse for that portion by which you exceeded their guidelines. The fourth and fifth columns then shows how much the project square footage exceeds the MSBA guidelines for an elementary school in square feet and in percentage terms. So as you can see, I focused on the two main areas that exceeded the MSBA guidelines. The first one is core academic spaces. That's listed as academic. And as you can see, that space excuse me, exceeds the MSBA guideline by 12,850 feet, or 38%. In other words, that core academic space is 38% more space than what the MSBA guidelines indicate. Then special education is next. Special education space exceeds the MSBA guideline by 3,300 square feet, and that's 36% more than the MSBA guideline. All of the other areas only increase slightly. I think the biggest one in the all other category that's not listed separately is the cafeteria and food services, and that's where is the biggest factor in that 7% increase in the all other category. So then we get down to total net, and as you can see, the total net square footage, net being the usable space as opposed to total gross, which is the entire building footprint. So total net exceeds by 18,000 square feet, or 25%, and total gross exceeds the MSBA guideline by 28,081 feet, or again, 25%. So there's 25% of one of the two main factors in the total project cost in terms of the construction of the building itself, not any of the other thing, land acquisition, etc., is the cost the number of square feet and the cost per square feet. You multiply those two numbers and you get the total estimated building costs. And that's going to be an important number that I'll get back to. So as I said, a 25% increase in square footage is roughly equivalent to a 25% increase in the total cost of the project. Where is the detailed justification for this large increase over the MSBA guidelines? When the topic has come up, they've made some general things about they have special requirements and da-da-da-da-da, but nobody's provided a detailed cost. All right, you want this additional thing, justify it. And how much is that, how many square feet does that add? There's none of that in there. I mean, none that they've issued publicly. You know, I just took a look at some of stuff they recently put up that they sent to the MSBA, and it's like 600 pages of detailed stuff going back over the entire project. And there were actually two of those documents, part one and part two. How are most people going to figure out that there's something in there worth looking at when it comes to justifying these additional space requirements? You know, nobody's going to look at it, and it gets buried. So it is not enough for them to make generalizations about the need for larger sizes. They should have to justify every area that exceeds the MSBA guidelines. And they haven't, at least not publicly. And there's really two reasons for that. One is because of the substantially higher cost for that extra square footage. But secondly, because it is entirely likely that the town's lower reimbursement rate from the MSBA for the project results, at least in part, from the amount of square footage by which the project will exceed the MSBA guideline. In the past, Shrewsbury was getting almost 50% reimbursement from MSBA, in other words, the state of Massachusetts. Now it's down, I believe the number being quoted is 34 to 36%. Why is that number so much lower? They claim it's because that Massachusetts has less money to give out. I don't buy that for a minute. I think it's because, part of it anyway, is because they have exceeded the guidelines, and so the MSBA is only going to reimburse for those things that meet the guidelines and maybe a little bit extra, but not the entire extra square footage. Anyway, so now let's go to slide 3. Now, slide 3, this is, you really can't make anything out of this. I wanted to put it up for you and let you know, I have to apologize for the poor quality, but in fact, taking it off of the Beale School Building Committee's documents online, this was already a very poor quality presentation. They tried to squeeze so much information on it, it's barely readable in its original version on the town's webpage. And so when I copied it, scanned it, it was even worse. But I do want to point out some very important features about this. The first thing is that I'm not sure this chart is worth the paper it's written on, and I can tell you some of the problems with this graph. And this was a major factor, this graph was a major factor in the committee's estimate for cost per square foot for the new school, and therefore in the total cost for the school, for the school project. And let me just explain to you some of this. The cost per square foot. Okay, well, first of all, MSBA has its own guideline of which back in as late as this January was $322 per square foot. Now, I don't know whether that's a blended cost for elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. I suspect it's for a elementary school, okay? Recent schools, according to this chart, say that the average has been like $428, and the building committee is saying by the time we get to start building this thing, inflation will have gone up even more to bring it up to over $480 to $490 a square foot. That's, I mean, it's based on this chart telling you that there's been this upward trend in cost per square foot for other projects, and therefore extrapolating it to Shrewsbury. But there are several problems with the data. The data includes elementary schools projects, middle school projects, high school projects. Several of the towns mentioned include, Hanover, Norwood, Wellesley, Burlington. I mean, these are very wealthy, large communities that have a large commercial base that maybe went ahead and said, gee, we're going to exceed the, MSBA, we're going to put extra things into our school that MSBA isn't going to reimburse. So that will skew these numbers upward. And if you actually go there, you'll see that the chart shows some very big variances. That line goes up slowly at a particularly constant rate, but there's a lot of projects that fall way above and way below that average. And I suspect part of the reason is because, as you would expect, a middle school or a high school will have higher cost per square foot because they're high schools and middle schools and have extra requirements than an elementary school. So you shouldn't have any of those other in there. And then you have schools for Worcester and for Boston. Well, guess what? Those schools, again, because they get such a high reimbursement rate, I believe Worcester was like 90% reimbursement from MSBA. So they don't have a problem with getting a little, expensive with with what they say they want to have. So again, you take all those things into account, and it makes this graph look somewhat, if you adjust for those factors, you might find this is a lot less. And then it's the inflation factor. To say that in 2 years, it's between now and 2020, when this project is going to get, probably sooner than 2020, put out to bid, that inflation is going to increase it from $420 per square foot to $480 per square foot. All of their estimates are using numbers that will tend to inflate numbers that we've used in the past. I mean, to say that, 2011, I believe, the middle school, they originally said, oh, it's going to cost over $54 million. Then they sharpened their pencils, quote unquote, within a week and brought that down by several $1 million. I believe the end project, now that it's been closed out, is down around $42 million. So they throw out these large numbers, and because they want the extras, and they throw in even more, they overestimate even more, so that, when the project comes to fruition, they'll be able to say, oh, well, look at us. Aren't we wonderful? We brought this project in under budget. That's not the way to run a good project, to overinflate. Yes, you need some contingencies in it, but you shouldn't be overestimating the cost every step of the way by adding the square footage, by adding all these other factors, by comparing yourself to middle schools and high schools in terms of the cost structures. It makes no sense at all. there's really something, terribly wrong with that. And again, the other thing is the projects in here, some of the projects on this chart are for projected costs. Are those projected costs based on the original cost estimate? How many of these could be like Shrewsbury, where they came in several $1 million under, in which case, again, the chart's going to be skewed upward more than it needs to be. Also, how much contingency is in these budgets? They talk about two different methods of managing the project. Well, if you're using one method, you can put in lower contingencies because you now have a clerk, I don't know, clerk of the works or some terminology like that, who's overseeing the project. So that also can affect it. So you shouldn't be, if we're using one methodology, we should be comparing ourselves only with that methodology, that management process, and only elementary schools, and only schools that don't get these extraordinarily high reimbursement rates. I don't know, they only listed a few of the schools here, but I mean, you could, some of the major cities, other cities like besides Worcester and Boston could be, do these include Springfield schools? Do they include Fall River schools? Do they include schools like Lowell that probably are getting reimbursed almost 100%? And because of their special needs, their costs per square foot may be a lot higher. So this chart is basically, isn't taking any of those factors into account, and that could skew this chart, change the direction of this chart substantially. And I believe it would if they provided all the numbers. That's another thing. They didn't provide any of the source data from which they put all these numbers together. Now, maybe, I guess they got this information from the state. Well, get the information from the state to show those particular towns, and to show whether these are projected costs, and to show what the reimbursement rate is, and to show whether they're elementary or middle school or high school projects, or maybe they're regional high schools, which also have higher costs. All these different things. You mix all this stuff together, and this thing really doesn't make any sense. Oh, I do have some notes about the Sherwood Middle School. The first estimate was over $50 million, and they, quote, sharpened their pencils and came in with a $47 million reestimate. Then the final request came in, I believe, between $43 and $44 million when they finally, finished their detailed design, et cetera. And then the final cost came in at, I don't know, $41 or $42 million. So how much contingency was in their final request? How much contingency was used? Again, if the middle school could be built not 7 years ago for only around $42 million, how can we justify an elementary school, which should cost less per square foot than a middle school? How can we justify it costing almost, well, more than double what a middle school cost just 7 years ago? Again, they don't go into that detail. You can say, well, we had the public hearings on the site selection, which is another big problem because they chose the poorer of the two sites between Allen property and this. And there's some good reasons why I say that, which I can really back up, but I won't go into that for this show. But, so here you go. You got that kind of situation. You've got situations where they come in with these high estimates that they don't provide enough detail for someone like myself who wants to understand how you can justify these kinds of very high rates of increase between the middle school and this elementary school that's going on now. How can that happen? Where, you can't just throw these numbers out. You got to remember that whether it's the site selection process or the size of the building or the cost per square foot and what's going to be in that building, the building committee and school officials and the school committee, give the engineers guidance, okay, in terms of what their expectations are. And you can bet that based on that guidance, the engineers are going to say, well, when it comes to certain estimates, we're going to estimate on this side, and then we're going to estimate, and on another estimate, we're going to estimate on this side, And nothing in and of itself, these individual things, but as you start, building higher estimate for this, and then adding that to a higher estimate for this, and then adding higher square footage than what the MSBA guidelines call for, you end up where you start ratcheting up those costs, faster than they really should be. And that's a problem. And I just want to go back to something else. So let's just summarize on this whole Beale School cost, estimated cost, I should say. The two key numbers for just the building now. We're not talking about other things like, site acquisition, demolition of the current buildings, maybe some hazardous waste removal issues that might be coming up. The equipment in the building, the desk, the chairs, the cabinets, all that stuff, that's not in the building cost itself. So let's just focus on the building costs. We take those two key numbers, 142,631 square feet, which is their project cost. They may have tweaked it a little bit in the intervening months, but not by much, times around $480 to $490 a square foot. You end up with a cost just for the building of $70 million. And this is just for the building. As I said, it doesn't include a lot of those other things that we're going to increase the cost further until you get around up to like $85 to $90 million. $85 to $90 million, that's twice what we paid for the middle school just 7 years ago. A middle school that, because it's a middle school, should cost more per square foot. If we were building the elementary school and a middle school at the same time, you'd be paying more per square foot for the middle school. That's just the way it is. So, as I said, I think this number is inflated, so that once the project is further along, town officials, first of all, it's inflated because they've got extra stuff in there. So part of the much higher cost is related to the fact that they want more. They're getting more than what the guidelines pay for, and I believe that that's one reason why the MSBA is going to reimburse us at a lower rate, which means the town has to pay a bigger share of the total cost. Okay, but the other reason why these numbers, I believe, are inflated is so that they can turn around come next winter when they've got a more detailed design. They'll say, "Oh, look at us! We did the study, and it's coming in lower." And then when they are doing the building project, they'll find more reasons to be able to, everything's working fine, so they'll be able to cut it again. And then when you get down to finally ending the project, they'll be, "Oh, wow, look at us. Aren't we heroes for bringing the cost down from the original quote of, let's say, $90 million down to, $82 million. Well, that's great that they brought it down, but it's only because they inflated the number to begin with to cover themselves. That's unfortunate, and that shouldn't happen. You can do a much better job estimating these kinds of things and making sure that you balance out where you overestimate and where you underestimate to come in with a number that's going to be a lot closer to the actual final number. They don't do that because for political reasons, and yeah, that's truly unfortunate. So with that, I think I'll be having more to say about the whole Beale School project. Again, the town meeting is going to special town meeting in October, primarily for this purpose, and then the whole town will be voting on this. And of course, right now it's too late to be going in and beating this stuff up. It's too late. There were no public hearings to talk about these kinds of issues. That's unfortunate. Anyway, until next month, have a good summer. Thank you. Bye.